This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free lecture notes that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
Chapter 16 deals with how people learn and the learning process, and several pieces of terminology that you really have to know. First of all, the two kind of approaches to learning. There is a behaviorist approach or behaviorist psychology. This is really based on giving rewards. You are taught to behave in a certain way because a certain form of behavior ends up rewarding you. This is sometimes known as Skinnerism, after very famous experiments done with pigeons. You could teach the pigeon to press a lever with its foot, because every time it did that, it got a piece of grain out that it could eat. And you could see how you could train people doing this. If you behave this way and this way and this way, then you're going to get this reward, this reward, and this reward. If you don't behave like that, then you're not going to get any rewards, and so on. So it becomes almost an automatic response there. It almost requires no thought. It becomes almost conditioned within you, almost Pavlovian. Ring the bell, and some minutes later, the dog begins to salivate. Here we're saying we're just interested in getting people to react in the proper way to certain stimuli. We don't, in a way, care very much whether they understand why they have to react like that, but at least we're getting the required output. A cognitive approach looks a little bit more detail. It's more to do with explaining why you should do this, gaining an understanding of why certain forms of behavior within an organization are going to be important. So rather than giving kind of rewards or giving some sort of withdrawal of rewards, maybe to staff who are interacting with your customers here, you explain to staff, look, if you don't treat the customers correctly, the customers will go somewhere else. If the customers go somewhere else, we won't need as many staff. We don't need as many staff. That might mean you losing your job and having to go through some sort of recruitment process again. So this might be quick, I suppose, but it's not very flexible. Once people have come across new situations, the behavioral approach which they have been kind of drilled into them may not apply very well in the new situations, and they're at a bit of a loss because they don't understand why they're doing it. The cognitive approach should be more open-ended, should be more adaptable to new situations. So, behaviorist and cognitive approaches. Honey and Mumford, important to know these names and to know how they classified really 4 different types of learning style. And in any body of 50 people, there will be people from each of these learning styles there. And we have to think to what extent just giving them one way of learning, one approach, is not going to suit all of them. And in many ways, the best way of presenting training and learning and development to people is to give people a whole range of styles. Some people are quite happy reading a textbook. Other people prefer coming to a lecture. Other people prefer coaching and learning in that sort of environment, and so on. Training and learning is certainly not where one size fits all. Anyway, Honey and Mumford identified 4 types of approach to learning. First of all, they had the theorists. And the theorists are unlikely to do anything until they understand the theory. They will put down very, very careful preparation. So it's a little bit like if you got some flat pack furniture from something like ACCA, the theorists would set out the instructions. They would read all these instructions very carefully all the way through to the end. They would set out all these pieces of wood and the screws and so on here. and they would approach it in the kind of textbook way. And this is how they would learn to kind of construct the article. The opposite, go down to activists, that's kind of the opposite of that. This is the person who, when they get their piece of furniture from IKEA, they basically or hardly bother with the instructions at all. They kind of look at it, they're itching to get going, really. They might make a mess of it, but that's the way they do it. Similarly, if you had a new piece of software, what they're likely to do is to kind of get into the software, press this, bring this menu down, see what it does, and so on there. Whereas the theorist would carefully go through the kind of user guide, maybe try a little bit, a bit more through the user guide, try out a little bit, and so on. Just different approaches to it. But we're not saying one is right and one is wrong. We're just saying they're very different. Reflectors tend to be fairly kind of quiet, cautious. They'll be very kind of, or you'd almost, in a class of 20 people, you'd hardly notice them. They'd be kind of sitting there thinking quite hard and observing carefully, considering what was going on. They tend to prefer to work on their own, to come to their own understanding, their own conclusions, thinking quite hard as they go. And finally, the pragmatists. The pragmatists are particularly turned on to learning if they see a practical outcome to it. So if they see how, let's say, again, something like Excel, they see how maybe using database functions or using pivot tables or using lookup tables and so on. If somebody says, look, if you use this particular function in Excel, then it will do this fantastically quickly for you. And this is what would really inspire them to go and learn about that. But if they can't see almost an immediate gratification in terms of practical use, they're unlikely to be very receptive to learning. Finally, in this short chapter, we have another approach. We have Kolb, who is associated with the idea of experiential learning, where you go around this cycle: experience, reflection, theory, try theory, experience, and so on. So let's say that you were in a sales team, you were bidding for a contract, and you didn't win the contract. So basically, that's your experience, an unpleasant kind of experience of not winning the tender, not winning the contract. So you go away and kind of think about that. You think, why didn't I win the contract? And you go up and down various reasons why you didn't win the contract. Maybe it was because the price was too high. Maybe it was because the documents you presented to them didn't maybe cover everything that was in the specification. Maybe only one person went along, and it might have been better if a team of 3 people had gone along, so there were more people to be talking to, participative, and so on. But after this reflection, you come out with a theory as to why this experience happened. And the next time you have to go for winning a contract, you put the theory into practice, and you see how the experience was there. And maybe it doesn't make any difference, and then you have to go around again and try a completely different tack. Maybe what you're doing makes an improvement, and you think, oh God, we have an improvement, we're not perfect yet. Let's see if we can define and redefine and so on, get things really pinned down to something which is going to be very, very excellent indeed. So it's a kind of iteration going round, gradually by, to some extent, trial and error, trying to learn the best way of doing something.